jack it up.
Y'all ready to crank it up?
Yeah.
Is Wes not coming?
There are no deer in Allentown.
Mayor Castleberry. Oh, my word.
Thank you. Mayor Kringle.
He's
Kringleberry. I'm trying to get into the season here. Good evening, everyone. Glad to see you here tonight. We proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please feel free to join us. Susie, could I ask you to?
Sure. If you'll bow with me. Our gracious Father, we thank you for all the blessings that you've given us. We just thank you, Lord, for this holiday season. We just ask, Lord, that you make us ever mindful of those that are in need and those that have needs, and also make us mindful of the ultimate sacrifice that you made and the fact that you were born. And we hope that everything that we do will be honorable to you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now call this meeting to order. Mr. Guerra, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Miss Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Here.
Miss Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Miss Isby?
Here.
Okay. Before we get started tonight, we have a very special guest here tonight. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break. Special guest, are you here?
Merry Christmas.
Santa.
Mayor and I've had a chance to talk about who's been naughty and nice. We'll start over here. We have some kids.
You got 3 real nice ones right there behind you too, Santa.
Are you Santa's helper?
I know the
I am.
kids are
I'm the elf.
very nice.
What in the world?
The naughty list. That's what they tell me. Good, man.
And this stuff is really good to eat with just a spoon.
Ah, you did get something.
I did get some shit.
He said we didn't know if he'd been naughty or nice.
This is, so far, we're on the
Thank
the
you.
nice side.
All right. All right.
Merry Christmas, Santa. Thank
Mayor's is for
Excuse me.
you.
That's okay.
Thank you.
That's okay.
What is this? Crunchy? Okay.
It's low fat too.
Why?
Better.
I'm not falling for that.
Oh, my word. Oh, I bet it's delicious. Thank you, Trader Joe's. You've been making a trip. Cookie batter. Ooh. Sounds, we may have to break it out. In a separate time? Thank you, Santa.
Let's see how many we have left.
They are right on this side. Don't worry about that.
You took care of the good
You gonna
side.
Yeah. Started at the right place. I mean, allegedly.
Well, Shelley, yeah,
Shelley's okay.
Yeah, that's all right, though.
Yeah, cookie batter. Trader Joe's, have you been Trader Joe's yet? Haven't been there yet.
I'm gonna go tonight.
I've been one down Texas.
You want something to go there tonight?
Your sister's been.
Thank you, Santa.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I had no.
It's been crazy.
Right out.
Thank you. But yeah, they have all their own brand stuff.
Here comes the lump of coal.
I was wondering what that was.
Here comes the lump of coal.
There you go.
Santa, thank you very much.
Of course.
And we have one more guy who's here with us all the time, Santa.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Joe.
Can't forget Joseph.
I can see my granddaughter just spooning this out.
Oh, that's good stuff.
For sure. Hey.
I can vouch for those 3 Gates children. They've been really good.
Well, I've seen them before, and I know that they're really good.
And their mama's really sweet. That's as far as we're going.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Santa.
Santa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Santa.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, you should have received copies of the November 26, 2019 City Council minutes.
It is good.
Any corrections, changes, or comments?
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Our first order of business tonight is the Economic Development Committee, and these are really a couple of great things tonight. Really good for the city of Conway. Our first is to discuss an ordinance authorizing the issuance of industrial development revenue bonds for the construction and equipping of an expansion to certain existing industrial facilities located at 670 Equity Avenue and 780 Equity Avenue to be utilized by SFI, and Gordon Wilburn is here to speak in this. We'll declare this public meeting open. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Well, I'm Gordon Wilburn, but I'm a native of Conway, but not here anymore. But, I'm happy to answer any questions, but this public hearing on the issuance of up to $4 million of industrial development bonds for an expansion at the SFI facilities. It's for the construction of a building and equipment.
This is another plus for Conway and Jamie and Chamber, CDC. Appreciate all y'all have done. Would you like to speak, Mr. Gates?
Just to add that with this project, will be resulting in some new jobs. We'll be getting a release out on behalf of SFI and the community very soon. And so it is another, it's an expansion of a existing manufacturer, which is good in an entirely different way from the other announcements we've had. And so we'll have the details, but we do see today we're addressing the capital costs, but we will see new payroll and new positions associated with this as well.
Great.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for or against this economic development issue here?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll just make sure everybody knows that my daughter works at SFI.
Okay, thank
So-
you. Well, this is good news. Anytime we can help someone to grow in their footprint, expand here in Conway, that's a plus for us. Thanks for all y'all's help. We'll declare this public hearing closed, and we'll bring it back before the council. Next, we would have an ordinance authorizing the issuance of these industrial development revenue bonds for the construction and equipping of an expansion to those facilities at 670 Equity and 780 Equity for SFI. So I'll
Make
take
a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Say aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
With the emergency clause, Ms. Smith?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Okay, this will be ordinance 019-127. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Both those pass 7-0. All right. Next, we have a public hearing to discuss ordinance authorizing, the issuance of industrial development bonds. We've already heard about this one. This is one 1800 Sturgis Road for structural and mass timber. It's going to bring 130 jobs to Conway. I will declare this public hearing open, and you don't have to tell us who you are this time, Gordon.
Well, this is the mystery project that we couldn't disclose in the ordinance until yesterday, but I know you know all about it now. 130 jobs, up to $75 million under the industrial development bonds. I think they may have said up to $90 million in total investment, but $75 million would be the bond issue. And it's to acquire the facility, to renovate it, refurbish it, and for equipment.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wilburn? Would anyone else like to speak to this?
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yes, yes. We are so glad that this company chose to invest in Conway. This looks like it's going to be a long-term, happy relationship, and it's renewable energy. And it affects, for those of you that made it yesterday, it has an impact on our environment, a positive impact on our environment. So very glad they chose Conway.
And it's not just a Conway project, Mr. Mayor. This is an entire state of Arkansas. Mr. Gates, would you talk about this just a little bit? Because this is a big deal.
It is a big
This is a
deal.
big
Absolutely.
deal.
It is. One reason we were very excited, for whatever reason, the facility at 1800 Sturgis had been vacant for a number of years. And as luck would have it, we had a number of projects kind of circling at the same time. They were all good, but this is the one that we were most excited about because it is a new product, relatively new to the U.S. It's a company that's new to the U.S. Structure Lamb's been in Canada for many decades, but this will be their first United States operation. And the end product are heavy timber beams that have been engineered kind of project by project. They deconstruct lumber and put it back together using some advanced technologies to create a steel quality or superior beam, so a steel alternative for construction. And what's interesting about this project is so you will have the timber industry in South Arkansas growing the trees. You will have the lumber industry in South Arkansas providing dimensioned lumber raw product to this facility where we will turn it into a construction material. And then the first customer, one of the largest customers the company's ever had, will be the new corporate headquarters in Bentonville for Walmart. And so its home will be in a white collar. So you have ag, advanced manufacturing, and corporate headquarters all taking place really in three completely different parts of the state. And the product itself, because it's a natural product, when you compare it to steel, where the process emits carbon and has a kind of its pollution byproduct, this is a product that captures carbon and it's sequestered forever in the product and in the building. So the net result is an office building that is storing, many tons of carbon emissions. And so we are now, Conway is going to play an important role in the timber, lumber, and construction materials. And that's not somewhere we anticipated it ourselves being a year ago, but it's where we are now. And we are very excited about helping this company grow, be successful. Production is about 570 days away. So July of 2021, they'll be producing product. You can back into that where they outfit the facility, hire a lot of people, but that gives us time to help them grow, find new customers, and hopefully we get that jobs number up.
Great. That's wonderful.
It's a really interesting process. And tell me if I'm wrong here. I got the quick lesson. The engineering is really what takes the longest, and once they get it engineered and the plans sent down, everything drilled, it's just really boom, boom, boom after that.
Yeah, by the time the product makes it to a construction site, you're saving a lot of time there, and that's one of the value propositions for the material. So
we appreciate all the CDC and Chamber did.
Uh-huh.
We'll now declare this public hearing closed. Next up, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the industrial development revenue bonds for this property at 1800 Sturgis Road.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption in the emergency clause.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 019-128. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Both passed 7-0 with the emergency clause. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
They want to close this year, so I'll get with you guys to get things signed before the end of the year.
Good
Check
deal.
Your travel schedules.
Fantastic.
Does any of these 3 right here have a question before they leave?
No.
Next up, we have our Community Development Committee, and Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on this portion of the agenda is a consideration to approve boards and nominations for the Oak Grove Cemetery, the Airport Advisory Board, the Planning Commission, Historic District Commission, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, and Conway Tree Board. We have a list of the people who have been nominated. The Oak Grove Cemetery, it's Jackie Brown Lamar, whose term will expire December 30th of '23. On the Airport Advisory Committee, Bill Atkinson and Brad Teague, their terms expired December 31st, 2020. Harold Clendenin and Kevin Wish expire on, their terms expire December 31st of '21. Fletcher Smith and Steve McGee on December 31st of 2022, and Robbie Will's term expires December 31st of '23. On the Planning Commission, new terms are suggested for Rebecca Fincher, whose term will run through December 31 of '24, and Drew Gaynor, same dates. Historic District Commission, Margaret West, Liz Hamilton, and Steve Hurd, all of whom have terms that will run through December 31, 2022. And the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, Lori Ross, Mariah Bruner, and Peter Mell, all of whom have terms that run through December 31st, 2022. I would make a motion that, I'm sorry, we have one more, Conway Tree Board. Thank you very much. Blake Sass, thank you. Term expires December 31, 2021, and Bonnie Stidham on December 31, 2022. And with those dates and people, I move that we grant or approve those nominations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve these nominations. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
That's 7-0. Mr. Hawkins, the B2 has been pulled. That has been
Okay.
paid.
All right. Next item, Mr. Mayor, would be a resolution requesting that the Faulkner County Tax Collector place a lien against property on 516 Ash Street for expenses incurred by the city. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 516 Ash Street? There's $426.84 that the city has expended to clean up this property. Owner or representative of an owner from 526 Ash. Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone. So we have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R-1976.
Motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for property located at 516 Ash Street. Any discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
That's 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing an application to the Arkansas Economic Development for repairs and equipment at the Conway Municipal Airport at Canfield Field. And we have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R-1977.
And for those of you who've not had the chance to meet, this is Michelle Anthony. She is our airport director.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hi, Michelle.
You're up, Michelle.
Well, this resolution is to request approval to apply for this grant, which will help with some repairs. It's a no-match grant, and it will not affect this year or next year's budget for the airport or the city.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this request. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance authorizing a reclassification within the airport department. And Ms. Anthony, would you like to talk about that?
Sure.
Thank you.
This ordinance is to change the current position from lineman supervisor to the operations manager. This would allow us to ask of this person for more duties to back up the airport manager, and also to stay on top of safety issues that may come up. This will not affect this year's budget or next year's.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as
Is there an
019-129.
emergency clause
Second.
in this one? Okay. There's also an emergency clause with this, Miss Isby.
I will add the emergency
Second.
clause.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
Vote on here.
Self-out base now. Motion and a second to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. I'm sorry, Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
And the mercy clause, Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Those both pass 7-0. And what was that ordinance number?
019-129.
129.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to enter into an agreement with Craft and Tull to provide engineering services associated with the Tucker Creek Trail Extension Project for the Transportation Department. And Finley, you're up, madam. Come on.
Well, I thought I had everything covered when I came to you guys a couple of months ago with several on-call contracts, but I missed one. What I hadn't anticipated was the need for an aerial survey. And the reason we need this is because the Conway Corporation approached us about a month ago. They're acquiring a bunch of easements along Tucker Creek south of Dave Ward for sewer. And they saw an opportunity for us to maybe be able to partner together and put a trail in said easement, and asked me how wide the easement would need to be, and I need some preliminary survey information in order to be able to answer that question. We have an on-call contract right now for a general survey, but Craft and Toll has the ability to fly this and do it with an aerial drone, which will be much more cost-effective. So that's the purpose of this on-call contract. The first task order of which will be about $32,000.
I'll make a motion for approval of this.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve this request. Any discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
This
Mr.
goes in
Hawkins.
this year's budget or next?
Next. I don't
2020.
think we'll get it done this year.
Do or do not? I'm
I do
sorry.
not think
Do not.
we'll get it done this year.
Thank
No,
you,
sir.
Next next item, Mr. Mayor, is resolution approving a change order for the Markham Street Jumpstart Project, Federal Aid Surface Transportation Program Fund. And we have a resolution to read for this. It's Resolution R 1978.
Mr. Benson.
Yes, sir. We, as it says here, the bid from Fury Heavy Construction was significantly less than the awarded amount for the grant. And so we are asking for the council to pass this resolution to increase or expand the scope of the job to use some of the additional awarded monies.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the change order for the Markham Street Jump Street project. Any further discussion?
Yeah, what are we using it on?
We're expanding the project, I think, 2 blocks
Right.
north.
Further north.
Yeah.
North?
Yeah, we're just
Yes,
about
sir.
to get up to Hendricks. A little bit more will be.
I think that only leaves 2 blocks left
Yeah.
to Spruce.
That sounds right. Good. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Finley, before you leave, can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
There's a four-way stop sign that was installed on Bruce Street, a block west of the railroad track not long ago.
Yes, sir.
Where'd that come from, and what was the buzz on that? I don't like it.
Is that Aaron's stop sign?
That's Aaron's stop sign. Yes, it is.
I think
Then
that
I'm waiting.
It was due to the number of accidents we were having there.
It was,
What I understand.
so.
You almost had another one the other day when you first day you put it in, because I almost slammed somebody.
Gotcha.
I drive that road every day.
Is there?
Yeah,
So Aaron had a serious accident there. How long ago was that, Aaron?
yeah.
And
1st of October.
we talked to a couple of the neighbors on those corners and actually a couple of the officers who told us that they witness accidents there on a regular basis. So I did a traffic study and determined that a stop sign, in fact, a signal may even be warranted there. It was pretty close. A stop sign was definitely warranted.
And when Finley first came to me, he was explaining it as Aaron's stop sign, and I finally had to say, "You're going to have to give me an address." But it was where Aaron had his wreck, and Aaron wasn't the only reason. There'd been a number of accidents there.
I wouldn't have put it in we jokingly call it Aaron's stop sign, but I performed a traffic study to determine if it was warranted, and it is.
That house on the corner there is,
Yes, it was warranted. It would have been warranted on the sheer number of accidents alone, but it was also warranted based on the speed and volume data that we collected.
Yeah.
the house on that corner is the problem. On the south side, that's the problem, because you can't, they park in the yard and on the street, and you can't see.
We also
anything
put up
coming
several
from the
no
east.
parking signs.
That's the problem.
But we can't, we put up no parking signs
No,
on
I like the
the
stop
street,
sign because-
but, you're right, they park in the yard, and I can't,
You can't
I
see
can't
around.
prevent them from parking in the
You
yard.
can't see down the street.
Right,
I meant to ask you last meeting and just
no problem,
forgot to ask.
no problem.
Thank
Is
you.
that it? Okay.
Congratulations, Mr. Knight. That's fast work to get something done in 2 weeks, which is about what it took from,
Have to be the right one.
you must know somebody.
No, I promise, if it'd just been for him, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, you almost cost me one, so we're almost even.
Of course.
Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see. And I'm through with that tomfoolery. Next item is an ordinance correcting the ward assignment of property that was annexed by ordinance 019-119. I'm looking to see who's jumping up. James? Yeah? Is that right?
I think we're on the Acela,
I missed
Acela
that.
program, yeah.
Hey,
Andy, you're
number 8.
skipping around.
I'm
Modify the
sorry.
contract for Acela.
I'm sorry. Consideration to modify a contract for a seller for the Planning and Development Department. James, I apologize.
Oh, no.
I was
You're about to wreck something else talking about
I
that
was
stop
marveling
sign.
at Aaron's fast work.
Well, continuing our rec motif,
Or what?
our rec motif, I'll talk about our contract with Acela. About 3 years ago, Planning and Development Department contracted with Acela for basically processing online permits and planning applications. From the time that we started that, it was been a very difficult implementation. They kind of shuffled us off to a third-party implementation company called Redmark, and they consistently did not meet their promises, did not meet the requirements of the things that we had, and we've cussed, pulled our hair out, all sorts of things, tried to make it work over the last 3 years. Around August, we finally determined that we needed to start looking for some type of replacement. The mayor tasked a committee of us, myself, Aaron, Tyler, and Michelle from permits, to look at exploring possibilities for a replacement. In between that time, when we started looking at that, our renewal came up for the Acela contract. And so we tried to put them off, delay them as long as possible, just send a quarterly payment. And those efforts were kind of met with, no, don't do that. We want to know why you're not signing the purchase order for another year. And so back in October, at that point, we then sent them a letter that basically declared our intent to sever our relationship with them. Thanks to a very strongly worded letter that I was able to sign that I got from Chuck, I think it scared their pants off. And so following that, they agreed to allow us to move to quarterly payments. So those payments equal about $43,000, so it's about $10,000 and change for each quarter, of which we had already sent them a check. They deposited that. They said that they couldn't apply it to our account. And so what this contract modification does is, originally in the contract, it said that we were signed up for a 10-year term.
It allows us to terminate the contract with convenience on a 30-day notice and allows us to make quarterly payments. And the reason why the quarterly payments are so important is that it allows us to shorten that period that if we do bring a replacement, we've got a pretty good idea of who we want to replace it with, and it's just a matter of the timing that would allow us to save some money in bringing that forward sooner rather than later. And that's really the long and short of it.
This really started when I was in permits, and we were having some issues with our development reviews, with the length of time it was taking. So we researched, and Acela seemed to be the answer. And when it first started, it looked like it was going to be a good thing. And then when they sold to this other group, then everything changed. One small example is for over a year, if you went in and if you were a developer and went in and typed in the city of Conway, we were Metropolis. And that's how, and it took forever. That's where Superman lives, but it didn't do any good if you were a developer. So we have had some issues with this, and Chuck has really worked well with this committee to make sure that we're doing the right thing here. But it's a good thing that they're letting us out because they are not what we need, not even close. They're not performing at all. So any questions for either these gentlemen or Mr. Clausen?
I make a motion, we adopt this contract modification.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this modification of our contract with the seller. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Let's see, Mr. Mayor, next item is, this is the one that I wanted to talk about a while ago, an ordinance correcting ward assignment of property that was annexed by ordinance 01919. Is this the right one?
This is the right one. We had in our the batch of things that we sent, we had a flurry of things that came forward. One of the things that slipped by us that thank God for the press, we had a reader of the Log Cabin Democrat that happened to notice in the ordinance we accidentally assigned an incorrect ward. So we assigned it a ward from halfway across town to the annexation on the south side of town. So what this ordinance does is corrects that to the correct ward.
Make a motion, we waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance and the emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Those both pass 7-0. And Mr. Hawkins.
Last item here, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance amending the Conway subdivision concerning submission deadlines for various application types for the Planning and Development Department. And James, one more time.
This was one that got left off in the batch that we sent that was changing the deadlines from 17 days out to 30 days out. So whenever we transmitted those, this was just one of the ordinances that got left off. So it's not in any hurry because we propose this not take effect until, I believe, for the March Planning Commission. So
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
A motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Be 019-131. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have our Public Safety Committee. And first off, we have ordinance appropriating insurance proceeds received from the Municipal Vehicle Program for the IT Department.
We're on C1.
Wait.
Hang on.
C1.
All right.
C1. Public service.
You've been in that.
I've got my.
You've been in that butter, hadn't you?
I've got my. Mr. Hopper, we're here to talk about the restructuring
Yes,
of your
sir.
department. All right. I'll straighten this out.
We can talk about that too if you want to.
You're good.
So for your consideration tonight, we sort of followed Finley's lead from last year. We have very similar positions in our department. Even though we do different things, we have drivers, equipment operators, and just general labor. And we've experienced a really high turnover rate this year, or higher than normal. The last 2 years, our turnovers went from about 25% to 32%.
Wow.
And in our exit interviews, the employees generally note their salaries. And this year alone, we've had several employees that we've hired and they didn't show up, or they would show up for 2 days or a week, and then they would quit for other jobs. The solid waste industry in general is difficult to find people that will first apply for the jobs and then stay with them. And with this restructure, we've added some tiered and graduated wages. We think that will help, keep some of our tenured employees and also attract some better applicants.
And, of course, you all know this is our sanitation workers. That's an extremely tough job, and they do a really good job. And he has it in his budget. It's not going to be an issue to cover. And he and I talked about this, and I know historically we've tried to give raises to everyone. But we're talking about if we ever have an instance where we're not picking up trash for a week, then that in itself is going to be a crisis. And I think it's important that we get our salaries up for our sanitation workers and hang on to our people.
I make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as number 132.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Thank
you,
you
Mr.
very
Hopper.
much.
Now, we're back on track. Or I'm sorry. Next, we have an ordinance appropriating insurance proceeds received from the municipal vehicle program for the IT department. Mr. Knight.
Well, part of this.
Is this something you did?
This was partially discussed already. This is an accounting ordinance to recognize funds received from AML for 2 instances with our department and appropriating those back to their respective accounts.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
What happened?
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
What'd you say?
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
What happened?
In terms of
Usually there's a wreck involved.
that would be one of them. The other was a break-in and vandalism of a vehicle.
Thank you, Mr. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 019-133. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr.
Mine says
Grimes?
D too.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Dispose of
Next up, we have Chief Spradlin, who's going to talk to us about consideration to approve the disposal of vehicles for the Conway Police Department.
Good evening. We've got 3 of our finest drug-seized vehicles that we no longer have use for. Unless we want to assign one to Aaron. I did have that thought earlier.
Use it up.
They ought to give it to Andy.
Aaron, you're not going to live it down.
As long as you got an airbag in it.
But the repairs on these vehicles are more than the vehicles are worth, so we need to liquidate these. And
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second to approve the disposal of this inventory. Any further discussion? Quick, now, Chief, these, since we cannot donate these.
they cannot be donated.
Okay.
Once they're sold, we have to split the proceeds with the prosecutor's office.
Okay, that's why. All right. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Next up is an ordinance appropriating reimbursement funds from various entities for the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
Just a general accounting ordinance that you've seen before, and I have nothing to add to that unless you have questions.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
A motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The 019-134, Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief Spradlin, did I understand that you let Chief Winter hire someone away from your department?
Yeah.
I'd take that.
We
Did-
refer to it as stole.
You didn't take that, and so you are taking it personal?
It's a theft. So,
Is there a report filed?
Next up, we have an ordinance accepting grant proceeds awarded to the Conway Fire Department Bomb Squad. Chief Winter. That's a good move, Chief Winter.
Yes. Be patient, what they said. We're asking for acceptance of a Homeland Security grant in the amount of $88,750. It's 100% reimbursable, along with the waiving of the competitive bids that we're going to use part of this grant for from a sole source vendor here in Conway.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance number 135.
Second.
Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief. Next up, we have Mr. Winningham, and we will discuss the fiscal year 2020 City of Conway budget.
The restructure that you just approved for Mr. Hopper is not in this budget. We talked about putting it in, but I thought as a matter of procedure, we ought to wait until it's officially approved. So we'll you can see he's got plenty of funding to cover it. He's got $750,000 surplus budgeted for 2020. So we'll bring you an appropriation ordinance shortly after the first of the year to just shore up his salary and benefit accounts for what that's going to entail. Our general fund sales tax, you can see we've got an increase there. It's still technically continuing with our practice to budget flat. 20.5 million is the number I think we're going to hit this year. And we should surpass that number because this year we've only had 6 months, half of a year with the new interstate sales tax rules. Next year we'll have a full year of that, but we don't want to count those chickens before they hatch. There is a line item in the non-uniform departmental expenditures, $250,000, which is, I think we mentioned that at the last council meeting. That's intended to be one of 4 annual contributions to replenish our general fund reserve for the times that we've had to dip into that this year with the settlement of the lawsuit, and then we've also used reserve funds for the remodel of City Hall. So we want to make sure that that doesn't get too low. The big thing, there's a 1.5% COLA in this budget. I'll speak on behalf of everybody. Thank you, Mayor. This is going to be the 3rd consecutive year that we've been able to get a COLA in. And I think, Mayor, you wanted to hit on this.
I did.
Did you?
And I'd like to thank the department heads because of your work and paring your budgets back. We've been able to help our employees for the last 3 years. So I appreciate y'all biting the bullet on that. On the 1.5%, that is for all paid employees. However, I want the council to vote yea or nay on myself, Chuck, and Mike since we're elected. So we'll put that out there.
Those COLA increases are in there now, but if council decides to take that out, then we'll take that out before we vote on the ordinance. So Mayor wanted to leave that up to the council.
What's our surplus from our balanced budget? 120,000?
In the general fund, it's a little over 120,000. Yes, sir. Our health insurance provider changed. We had the special meeting recently to talk about that, but the cost to the city did not. Our dental insurance did go up, but citywide that cost was less than $2,500, so not a material amount at all. That's all I've got really to point out. I'd be glad to answer any questions, and we've got all or most of our department heads here tonight as well.
I make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Move for adoption.
And the emergency.
And the emergency clause.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance for the 2020 fiscal year budget with the emergency clause. Any further discussion or questions?
Just a question, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
He said this does include the COLA for the 3 elected officials. Before we approve this budget with that, do we also need to vote on whether or not to include that?
I would think so.
Can we vote on just one of them and not all of them?
You can leave me out, Theo. I'm actually okay with it.
I make a motion.
included?
I thought he said it was
It's already
It's included.
included,
Let's take it
so,
out.
yes, I make a motion that we do also include the cost of living increase for the 3 elected officials.
Second, if we need to do that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the 3 elected officials. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Now we have a motion and a second with the emergency clause to adopt the ordinance. Any further discussion on the budget? Mr. Garrett?
This be ordinance 019-136. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mercy clause. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Those both pass 7-0. Thank you, Department Heads. Thank you, Mr. Wayne.
Thank you.
Ms. Mel, item that you and I discussed today.
Everything's fine.
Okay, just move along. Okay. Finally, our final discussion will be regarding our December 24th council meeting. I'll be glad to be here if y'all all want to be here, or we can vote tonight to not have it.
I make a motion, we cancel our December 24th meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith.
I have a motion and a second to.
I have to be in bed early so Santa Claus can get to my house.
I think I've already
I
got
wouldn't
my
count on a
one
whole
gift,
lot
so.
there, Mr. Hawkins.
Got mine, brother.
We have a motion and a second to cancel our December 24th council meeting. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Our next council meeting will be January 13th, 2020. The employee appreciation party is this Friday. It will start at 11:30. We'd love to see you all there. Department heads and everyone here tonight, Merry Christmas. God bless you all, and we're adjourned. I'm sorry, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Bart, again for the cookie butter.
Thank you for this.
Garrett?
Yes, thank you.
That's good stuff.
That is really good stuff.